The next item on our agenda tonight is a request by Mr. Richard Browning to come forward and address the City Council. Mr. Browning.
Good evening.
Would you give us your name and address, please?
Sure. My name is William Richard Browning. I go by Richard. And I live at 515 Live Oak Drive here in Euless. Only moved here about 3 or 4 years ago. We were buying an empty nest house. It's time to get out of the two-story house. I come before you today to call your collective attention to an affront to liberty of all that visit Euless or may be exposed to Euless via the internet or other media, specifically the use of designated free speech zone signs to identify a limited area for free expression. It's my understanding that this practice began in response to a perceived abuse by some persons of their right to free speech. I first became aware of this practice on Saturday of the last Arbor Daze festival. A photo of the designated free speech zone signs posted on the City Hall lawn were posted on social media and garnered significant favorable response from people throughout the DFW area. Although we may all have heard political, social, or religious speech that we find objectionable and or offensive, those that recognize the imperative of preserving liberty see the risks of government restraints as much more dangerous than the harm caused by offensive speech. Benjamin Franklin said, "Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved, and tyranny is erected in its ruins." Obviously, I'm not suggesting that tyranny is imminent in Euless. However, as a precedent, it is a concern of, we earlier, if I may address it, we had the resolution for Poppy Day, and it's appropriate that we remember people that have died in service to the country and preservation of liberty, but that liberty has to be jealously guarded, and that's why I'm here before you. I've reviewed the Supreme Court position on their time, place, and manner restrictions, as well as the historical treatment of free speech abuse, including the bad tendency test that was used before 1900. Excuse me. And that bad tendency test was basically a tendency to bring about evil consequences. And this is as opposed to the clear and present danger question, i.e. an immediate substantive evil being at risk to curtail free speech. In consideration of the current Supreme Court position, I would like to point out 4 things. 1, the fundamental role of governance at every level throughout the nation in our constitutional democratic republic is to protect life, liberty, and property of each individual man for himself and from the abuses thereof by all of his fellows. Essentially, we're each supposed to be protected as individuals, and we're supposed to be assured through governance that each of us is not infringing on the other's rights. So I appreciate the concerns for those that abuse their rights. However, we need to be careful to make sure that we preserve those. Number 2, the SCOTUS Supreme Court of the United States and its position is as fallible and temporary as that of any legislative branch, as there are ample examples of major reversals of flawed positions in our past. Slavery, segregation of the races. I personally remember, I'm old enough to remember Jim Crow laws. I'm old enough to remember Leonard Brothers department stores downtown Fort Worth having colored-only water fountains. I remember asking my parents, "What's the problem?" And the water that comes out of there the same as the one that comes out of the fountain across the way. And of course, they didn't have an adequate response, unfortunately. We also had suffrage for women, where we made a reversal of what was originally set up, and then prohibition of alcohol, which was reversed, put in place and then reversed. Number 3, despite all propaganda to the contrary, all of my rights are naturally mine, not as an American, but as a human being. These rights are recognized by the Bill of Rights, and my rights are absolute, suffering only that the free exercise of my rights must not directly conflict with the prime directive of preserving life, liberty, and property for all men. Number 4, no man has a right to be offended. You don't have a constitutional right to avoid being offended, or without demonstrable reasonable cause to not feel frightened by the legal actions of another. It is imperative that we preserve liberty first, foremost, and always. We must deal with those that would harass or accost another, rather than usurp unjustly the task of restricting the rights of any man. This following quote is attributed to Thomas Paine. He said that he that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. It is imperative that we jealously guard free speech, and I therefore urge you to reverse any use of the designated free speech zone in the name of the liberty that your children deserve to see at all city functions. The current policy sends a message to our children that their rights are, in practice, merely privileges to be granted or curtailed at the whim of government, and it's the place of its choosing. I can assure you that I am steadfastly opposed to the current Supreme Court position on free speech and will continue to confront this usurpation of man's rights both here in Euless and wherever else I may find such signs. I am confident that I will not stand alone in this position, and that the City of Euless will not benefit from the attention that the current policy will bring to the city via the internet, print media, and television. In closing, Thomas Paine also said, an army of principles can penetrate where an army of soldiers cannot. I appreciate the opportunity to address you and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for coming forward, Mr. Richards. We will have, my city manager will touch base with you